Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is season 5, episode number 22. Today is Tuesday, May the 15th, 2018. I'm Graham, that's Tyler, that's Melissa. The gang is all here. We have a couple of games to talk about, which I'm sure everybody listening to this show is aware of. Not a lot of news this week, so we will get right to it. The Eastern Final went last Saturday night, which featured Rochester beating Georgia 9-8 in a nail biter. And the Western Final went on Sunday night, with Saskatchewan beating Calgary in a higher scoring but still nail biting game, 15-13. And since we have no news, we will get right into the awesomes and the not awesomes. And I will begin by talking about the East Final, which the whole game was awesome. The goalies were outstanding. I think there was a couple of minutes where Mike Poulin kind of lost focus, let in a couple. And then there were a couple of minutes in the fourth when Matt Vince did the same thing. But other than that, they were both outstanding. The defenses were great. The Georgia's ball movement was exactly what we got used to seeing last year and what we've seen pieces of this year as well. Just crisp passes, just going all over the place. But Rochester's defense was up to the task. It was low scoring through the first three quarters. It was 4-3 after 3. And then the Nighthawks took a bit of a lead, and then the Swarm came back. And the last 3 or 4 minutes were just on the edge of your seat the whole time because you knew that Georgia had the capability of coming back. You knew that Rochester had the capability of stopping them from coming back, and you just didn't know which one was going to win. And so it was just an awesome game, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to call that whole game awesome. Melissa, what do you have?
So I'm going to kind of follow along that same route and go just a little bit farther, be a little generic in the fact that we actually had a pair of really good playoff games. As we talked about last week, it can be really frustrating when you're watching really lopsided playoff games because this is when you expect just the absolute best lacrosse that you can watch. And when it's too one-sided, it's not as much fun, not as exciting. So having a couple really close games, definitely exciting. I love having that. And while I didn't get to finish watching everything, I am really looking forward to finishing the second half of the game I was watching. So what about you, Tyler?
I'm going to start with my first awesome being Rochester and their performance on Saturday. First thing that I really noticed is one of those things that's hard to find stats for, but their defense was super aggressive, double teaming whenever a Georgia person turned their back and they were up high, the high defender would just go and run. There was lots of double teams, which kind of got Georgia off of their rhythm. It made a big difference and shut them down offensively. Jake Withers, after Matt Vince, Jake Withers was my second star of the game. He was 14 for 22 on the faceoffs, 64%. But more importantly, his wins led to Rochester having a couple multi-goal runs because they essentially played make it, take it. And Georgia, in their need for a comeback, only had one multi-goal run in the fourth quarter. But even for those, I think it was not immediate after possessions. It was, they scored. Withers won a face-off probably, and then they went back down and eventually got the next goal. But they never had this growing momentum of quick successive goals because Withers' effort. Finally, the one individual accolade beyond that was Kyle Jackson. Beautiful goal where he just cut across the middle and ripped a shot behind the back and got over Poulin's shoulder or arm. It was wide open on the run behind the back. You just don't see it very often, but he nailed it and it looked beautiful. That was a beautiful goal. So those are my awesomes from mostly from Saturday night and Rochester and their effort. Graham, what do you have?
Second awesome. My first awesome was East. Second awesome is going to West Final. It was similar in that Saskatchewan, it was a fairly close game throughout. It was a lot higher scoring than the Eastern Final. But it kind of looked like Saskatchewan was going to just run away with it. But Calgary, as they often do, did not give up and clawed their way back into it, tied it up in the third quarter, and we had a brand new game tied at 8. Then Saskatchewan did it again. They looked like they were going to run away with it. They scored the next 4 goals, and I don't know about anybody else, but when Ryan Dilks scored an empty netter with less than 3 minutes left, you figure, okay, well, that's it. 15-11, we just got an empty net goal. There's only 3 minutes left. This game's over. But we all know in the NLL, the game isn't over until it's actually over, and Calgary scored a couple more goals and really poured it on at the end. And they couldn't get by the Saskatchewan defense, but they certainly made a game of it. And this one game wasn't quite as exciting as the Eastern Final, but pretty darn close. One interesting fact was that the losing team in both cases scored 4 of the last 5 goals. So there was certainly no giving up in any of those teams, and another exciting game. So as Melissa said, 2 really exciting playoff games, which is what you hope for all year. So we've got 2 or possibly 3 games remaining in the season. So hopefully those games are as good as these ones. Melissa.
All right. So I have to say the goaltending was really awesome. The East game looked like it was very defensive from the score, but that's not the whole picture. There was a lot of good shots that the goalies just shut down at some very crucial points in the game. So the game could have been very different if it were not for those goaltenders. So definitely have to get them some mad awesome props. They just looked really phenomenal. And as we've talked about, when you have one of those cogs not working, it can make a big difference. And goaltending, as we know, is very important. So I definitely gotta say that. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah. The interesting thing I thought Graham was going to mention at the from the Rochester Calgary game is that Calgary had 2 10-point scorers. Curtis Dixon 10 points and Dobby had 11 points for the losing team. And they had more assists, like they had better overall effort. But Saskatchewan had only 20 assists on their 15 goals. But they still won the game. So yeah, a lot of interesting stats to look at. But my actual awesome is oddly is the refs. There was a lot of close calls on the crease, and those are hard to do for the refs. It's partly because of inconclusive evidence, but every time that I remember they got challenged on it, the refs were right. So they have a very hard job to do, but they're getting it right, and it makes for a good product. Occasionally, if you do have a challenge, it will slow down the action, but I feel like they're getting fast at reviewing stuff nowadays. But you can try and challenge them, but they do a good job. And I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing to focus on and call out specifically. But the refs did a good job with their crease calls being correct this weekend. And that's just kind of something that stuck with me as I was thinking back on the weekend. So I made it one of my awesomes. Graham, you have another awesome.
I do, but I wanted to expand on that. Not so much expand, but just agree with that, and just say that the refs, whenever they make a mistake, everybody notices it. Everybody talks about it. If they don't make a mistake, nobody talks about it. So it's a thankless job, and we've said this on the show a number of times. It's a thankless job. They get everything right, and nobody notices. Nobody says anything. As soon as they get anything wrong, everybody goes on about how they're always terrible and they can't see anything and they can't do anything right. So, props to the refs for getting those right. And there were certainly, like you said, were a few calls that were. I'm sure. I think there were a couple of challenges in both games on a call that the refs made, and I don't remember any being overturned. So it implies that they got it right the first time. but we have all seen cases where they are certainly willing to overturn them. They're not going to come out and say, no, I got it right the first time, because if I overturn it, then that means I was wrong the first time. They just want to get it right, and if they didn't get it right the first time, then they have no problem coming out and saying, nope, I got it wrong. It was actually a goal. My other awesome, I guess, is the same one that Melissa just said, and that's goaltending. Specifically, this one was Matt Vince and Mike Poulin. They were both excellent for the vast majority of that game. I'm going to give Matt Vince the slight edge, partially because they won, but partially, and this I'll get into in my not awesomes. Lyle Thompson had a breakaway. Actually, I think he had 2 breakaways late in the fourth quarter. And when Lyle Thompson gets a breakaway, it's a good bet that he's going to score it. But one of them, I think, was stopped by the post. The other one was a great stop by Vince. But both Vince and Poulin made some outstanding saves. And just like the previous week, I can't remember which goalie it was that made a couple of really big stops, gave up a big rebound, and managed to stop the rebound as well, even though he looked like he had no business making that save. But both of them did it on Saturday night. So props to those guys. And that's it for my awesomes. Melissa, do you have any more?
All right. So I'm going to kind of combine the 2 that I had because they're pretty much things that have already been said. The refs, they've definitely been calling really good games. And not even just the goal or not goals, just the penalties in general. It hasn't been an overabundance where they're micromanaging the game, but they also haven't been letting it play so loose that the game starts getting out of hand. So just the reffing in general I definitely has been very impressed with. And then, of course, Calgary, they lost by 2 goals, but the way they started the season, who would have thought they would have been in the division final and only losing by 2 goals? So you definitely have to say, wow, because they are a long way from where they started. And I think they have some really good tools to work with going into next season. So it'll be interesting to see where they come around. But as we've said before, the Rush have just looked solid all year long. And so this wasn't too different. I would say Calgary definitely is stepping up. And so I definitely have to put them on my awesome list because they really hung in there. Nobody expected them to be in this place, and they really showed that they could show up. So I think it'll be interesting starting next season, but I can't wait till next weekend either. So what about you, Tyler?
Yeah, my last awesome for the week is, I guess I would say specifically awesome is an app for your mobile devices called Time Hop, which, if you're willing to give it the trust, will go back into your tweets and your Facebook and show you things you posted on this day. It's slightly not awesome, but on this day, 7 years ago, Sunday, May 15th, Toronto beat the Stealth, and it was the only time I spent 24 hours in Toronto. And so that kind of sucked. And I hate you, Graham. But on this date, 8 years ago, the Stealth won their NL championship, and this jersey was at that game. Mr. Brett Manny, though he wasn't playing because he hurt his elbow. But still, this is the 2010 version of the Stealth. So that was super awesome. And 9 years ago, with what a difference a year makes, Jeff Zwicky, Kyle Sorensen, Colin Doyle, all Stealth players from 2009. Doyle would then leave to go to the Rock, but they were playing for either Toronto or Hamilton Nationals in the MLL. And then a year later, they were battling each other for a NL championship. And 2 years after that, an NL championship. So May 15th, exciting times in Stealth Lacrosse player and Stealth Lacrosse history. So I guess we should also thank Mother's Day for giving us schedule conflict so we could record today instead of Sunday like usual. So thanks, moms. Thanks, Time Hop. Today is an awesome day in Stealth history. Graham, any more awesomes?
No more awesomes for me. Do you have any more awesomes, Tyler, or should we move on to the not?
You mean Melissa?
No, because I already said I was combining my last 2.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm out of awesomes.
All right. We'll go on to the not awesomes. And I have a couple. They could have been major, but turns out to be not so much. But first one is near the end of the fourth quarter. Rochester looked like they had the game kind of sewn up, but I mean, we knew Georgia was coming back and getting close. Rochester scored a goal. Austin Shank scored one at 8:50, so there was still 7 minutes left in the game. And Rochester basically had to just sort of run the clock out for the last few minutes. And I don't remember if this was before or after Shane Jackson scored his goal. He scored a goal at 12:50, so only a couple minutes left. It's now 9-8. And Rochester's had a couple of lazy turnovers. They, I think Vince made a save, kind of tossed it to a defender nearby. The defender either ran up the floor and wasn't paying attention. I don't remember the details of what happened. I think in one case, the defender was just running up the floor, and Lyle Thompson just came out of nowhere and checked him, and he dropped the ball and picked it up. And Thompson went in and hit the post. And then just a minute later, basically the same thing happened. Vince made the save, tossed it to a defender. Defender sort of turned around and kind of tossed it up for a long outlet pass, but wasn't really paying attention, and he basically threw it straight to a Swarm player. And I'm pretty sure it was Lyle Thompson again, or it was somebody who gave it to Thompson, and Thompson came in and Matt Vince made a great save. But if either of those sort of lazy turnovers had turned into a goal coming the other way, we have a tie game, and who knows what would have happened after that. So unless you're up like 6 or 7 goals with a couple of minutes left, you really have no room to be lazy like that, and you got to keep playing right till the last buzzer, especially in a playoff game, and especially against a team like Georgia. Because it worked out for Rochester, but it was awfully close and it may not have. So that was kind of not awesome. Melissa, what's your first one?
All right. So this may have been very isolated to the feed that I was watching, but when I was watching the Rochester Georgia game, the blue was interacting with the camera in a way. So it was like the camera was having issues with the bright blue. So players' legs had a blue tint to them. The blue was really fuzzy. And so for me, the video experience was not optimal because everything blue just had a fuzziness in it, kind of impacted anything near it. So like I said, that could have been isolated to my feed, but watching the game and having everything kind of have a blue tint or blue fuzziness was kind of not as enjoyable as it could have been, which all in all is a pretty minor complaint. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I've got, I guess, a couple of small minor complaints on the broadcast. I had one game at halftime, like right before, I can't remember which one, but right before halftime, all of a sudden it started stuttering. And it's so many factors. It could be like my network, could be their network. So I just like turned it off at halftime. And then I put it back on, and the second half was flawless. The other thing for me was our man, Brendan Glasheen. I think his first name is Brendan, but the new announcer, play-by-play guy. He, like, I was surprised to see him in Saskatoon on Sunday, but like he started a little slow. Like he butchered Gardonia's name and a couple other like players and situations, but then he got his legs underneath him. It's like, wow, man, he made him travel all night to get a consistent announcer. He is better than he was, but he still like had some moments. And I think the one thing specifically is he loves to say, "Ooh, there's a BTB shot or a BTB pass." And like, how does the average fan know what that is? How does the super fan even know what that is? Like, my wife had a guess of something that was actually BTB that was somewhat good, but behind the back, just say behind the back, please. It's a little thing, but it helps not make it sound like elite. Like, I don't know what the hell BTB is. So I'd like to see that slight adjustment. Graham, another not awesome for you, or maybe not?
I did notice the BTB thing as well, and I remember thinking it took me a minute or so to BTB. What the heck was it? And I think the fact that I saw the play happen live, and it was a behind the back shot, and he said BTB. BTB, what the heck is? Oh, okay. I kind of figured it out. But yeah, it's not something that's obvious. And I think what's his name? The Bandits guy, Randy Mearns, talks about GBs all the time. It took me a while to figure out what the heck a GB was, and it's a ground ball, which is what they call a loose ball in field lacrosse. So part of my issue is this is box lacrosse. We don't call them ground balls, and secondly, they don't call them GBs at all, and so that was a little confusing.
Gotta call
Which is
them
weird
Lucy's.
because
Lucy's is the best
yeah.
description I've ever heard of those. Like, oh, that's fun.
And which is weird because Randy Mearns actually played in the NLL for a while, so it's not like he's a field guy who's just doing commentary. He's a box guy as well. But my other not awesome is the other playoff game. We had the winning team doing some dumb stuff near the end of the fourth quarter. In this case, it was the Saskatchewan Rush taking a couple of unnecessary penalties. Near the end of the fourth, I was going to go look up, and that was 13:24 of the fourth quarter. So there's a minute and a half left, and you're winning by 2. Yeah, you're winning by 3 at that point because Westberg scored on the power play. But they took 2 penalties at the same time, giving Calgary a 5-on-3, which they managed to kill off most of because like I said, they only got 1 power play goal. But they got away with a couple of holds just before that that probably could have been called. And then they took these 2 at the same time. And it's like, didn't you learn anything from Rochester? Don't do dumb stuff near the end of the fourth quarter when you're winning. And like they had a couple of extra goals to play with. So even if they had given up 2 goals instead of 1, they were still winning. But with a team like Calgary, you don't want to let them get that close because you know what they can do. So, Saskatchewan played a pretty smart game in terms of penalties. They didn't take all that many, except for those 2 near the very end, which seemed like a really dumb time to take penalties. So that was not awesome. But other than that, I think they played a really good game. Melissa.
All right, so I just got my 2 cents on what Tyler had already said. I'm glad I'm not the only one that gets frustrated by some of the abbreviations and shorthand that is completely unnecessary, because as an experienced fan, you have to take a moment to go, wait, what was that? It throws you off. It takes you out of the game. And then, of course, when you're talking about unexperienced fans that are really trying to get into it, following along, it can be really confusing. It's like the first time you watch rugby, you have no idea what's going on. I've watched it several times, and half the time I still don't know what's going on. But those abbreviations make a difference, because when they're abbreviating things, if I don't have that context, I don't understand, and it's harder to learn, which might take potential fans out of it. Seems like a small thing, but in the class I teach, which is on business communications, that's one of the things we talk about a lot, is when you are in a small industry, you can have that shared vernacular, but you have to be careful because it can very much alienate, or it can be too much of a microcosm, and people outside that little microcosm don't understand what you're saying. So I definitely agree with that. Otherwise,
I've heard, if I can just interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
I've heard some science communicators talking about the same thing, that when they're talking about science to people, some of them tend to sort of talk down and say, well, I know all this stuff about particle physics, and I'm talking to people who aren't particle physicists, so I'm going to like dumb everything down. But what tends to happen, or what should happen, is and this is something I've heard from a science communicator named Cara Santamaria. What she said was, don't underestimate people's intelligence, but you can underestimate their vocabulary. So they may be able to understand the concepts that you're giving to them, but don't use industry words and jargon and stuff, because they won't understand those. But if you put it into plain terms, they can understand the concepts. And I'm sure it's the same thing with watching rugby, or I watched some Australian rules football for a little while last weekend or a couple of weekends ago. And of course, I don't know what the rules are. I have no idea what's going on. And the announcers were using all kinds of terms I wasn't familiar with, and I can't really blame them for that. But using all these terms that I didn't understand certainly didn't help me to figure out what was going on in the game. And I imagine it's the same thing with people watching lacrosse for the first time. And if we start talking about GBs and BTBs and stuff, and they don't know what those are, then just find yourself getting lost quickly and just tuning out.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with what your scientist friend said, because the better you understand something, you can completely break it down in simple terms without being patronizing. It actually is very possible. So B2B, you're not saving that much time. And when an experienced fan goes, wait, that's a what? Yeah. So those newcomers, we're alienating from the start. So I definitely would like to see for the newcomers. One of the things the Mammoth did, and I'm trying to think, I think they did it when it was on altitude. So I think it was something they did for the commercial breaks. It may also have just been in stadium, but they had kind of a lacrosse 101. So it was like, hey, this is what a slash is. This is what a moving pick is. And so they explained some of those terms in little snippets. And especially right now, having a lot of fans coming in, hopefully because of Twitter, it'd be nice to see maybe the league do something like that on a broader basis just to help, because people are already sitting through those commercials. So let's educate them and bring them along. So
those commercials that need content because they run the thing that just says this is a commercial. Like, so yeah, they should make some videos. That'd be beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's always really nice when you suddenly just get silence and you're like, wait, did it go down? Because there's been a few times I didn't even have that. There's a commercial and with the logos, it's like it was just black screen. I'm fighting with my computer trying to figure out what's going on, only to find that it was just literally dead air. So, but that's all I have. Did you have anything else, Tyler?
I have one more not awesome, and this is because I know the league listens to us as their authority on common sense choices. I would like one more tweak to the NLL playoffs. When you get to the championships, right now, the higher seeded team hosts the first game and the third game. I would rather they hosted the second and the third game, because if they're the higher seeded team, they're conceivably the better team, and they should have the chance to win at home. Because right now, if they are really the better team and sweep, they win on the road. So let's increase, like massively increase the odds that the higher ranked team wins the title at home by having the lower ranked team actually host the first game. And then the second and possibly third game are at the higher ranked team. So if they win, they get to be with their fans who cheered them on to be the best team. And the fans get rewarded by seeing the cup raised in their home stadium because they were the better team. Like right now, there's a lot less odds of that. Georgia last year didn't get that opportunity, and it would have been great for them and maybe great for their to grow their fan base. Like, oh, I saw them win the title, versus they played a game, they didn't lose, but then the season ended because I never saw it again because they went off into Canada and played a game somewhere. I have no idea what's happening. I wasn't going to pay $8 to watch it. And, oh, hey, they won. Good for them. They don't come back until next fall, so I don't get to celebrate with them. If the higher ranked team gets the second and third game at home, it increases their odds of winning at home and celebrating with those fans and growing the fan base and having a proper celebration. So I think that'd be a nice little tweak I would like to see the NL do. Whew. Graham, any more not awesomes for you?
No, and the only downside to that suggestion is that the lower ranked team, which, I mean, they didn't win, they didn't become the higher ranked team. So I guess this is an extra advantage for the higher ranked team, but it does mean that the lower ranked team has zero chance of winning the championship in front of their fans. So they can win game one, they can either win game two or lose game two and win game three, but either way, 2 and 3 are on the road. So the lower ranked team has no chance at all of winning in front of their fans. But that may be just something you give up in order to shake things up that way. Plus, it may also be possible to play both game 2 and 3 in the same weekend instead of stretching it out. If both teams are in the same city, they can play one on Friday night, one on Saturday night, or one on Friday night, one on Sunday afternoon, if that works out better. But yeah, because the way it is now, we have 2 or 3 games left in the season and almost a month to take to play them because of scheduling issues in Saskatchewan. So that seems like an awful long time. So I think it'd be good if they squash that down a little bit.
Well, not to mention, if they were still doing the one and done, the secondary team didn't have a chance of winning in front of their home fans no matter what. So I don't
Fair
think
enough.
we're really taken away from that. We're just kind of going back to closer to what it was. Although I would like to see the second and third maybe in the same weekend like that. I think that would be good.
So do I.
Now, it's interesting because in 2007, Rochester did not have their arena available, and this was a one and done. So instead of rescheduling the game, they actually just moved the game to Arizona so that Arizona, which was the lower ranked team, got to host the championship game, and Rochester ended up winning it anyway. But it's interesting that rather than force Saskatchewan to play game one in Rochester, they allowed them to shift the whole schedule off by a week. So I don't know if that was because of it's a best of three rather than just one. They decided to allow that versus just saying, sorry, you arena isn't available, so we got to move it somewhere else. So it's interesting that Rochester didn't have that opportunity. Now, it could also have been that in 2007, Rochester's arena wasn't available for the next 3 weeks, and they just said, well, we just can't do it. So I don't know all the details there.
Those darn circuses.
And yeah, that's the interesting part. It was a circus in 2007 in Rochester, and now it's Cirque du Soleil on one night and Shania Twain on the other. And both of those are going to probably sell out the arena in Saskatoon, so I suppose that we can understand that. All right, we'll move on to our predictions for the week. And Melissa and I are doing okay at 4-0, and Tyler is 1-1. Tyler was optimistic on Georgia, and that didn't work out, though it almost did. And obviously, we all got the Rush game, and Melissa and I got Rochester. So now we have the final. So instead of doing it a game at a time, I think we probably decided this a couple of years ago, we're just going to make one prediction for the series. And if you want to say in how many games, that's fine, but I don't think I did. So Melissa, you were 4-0, and you were used to going first, so we'll let you go first.
All right. So I am going to pick the Rush. It was definitely a hard one because, as Graham said, there was definitely some sloppy play from both teams. But the Rush have just been very consistent all season. They've looked like a championship team pretty much all season, whereas Rochester's been up, they've been down. They just played kind of good, not so good, everywhere in between. Rush have just played consistently very well. So, as we've said before, it's really hard to pick against the Rush because they've just been a solid team. And I do like the Rush. I would like to see them win another cup versus Rochester. So, sorry, Nighthawks fans. I like keeping it in the West. So, let's go ahead and we'll just circle around. Tyler?
Yeah, I have a different opinion. I am going to pick Rochester, probably in 3 games, because as inconsistent as Rochester was, they played the Rush twice this year, and they beat them both times. So they know something about upsetting the flow of the Rush's offense. There's some nice aspects. We get a couple of brother matchups, Hasek versus Hasek and Dawson versus Dawson. Though I was looking, it's like, wait a second. Dan Dawson didn't even play last Sunday. Like, Rush is so good, he's a healthy scratch. But he can come into one of the games of the series and give a change-up to the Rush offense that could mess up the way the Nighthawks play. But I like Matt Vince more than Evan Kirk. I like Rochester's performance in games that matter, and I like the fact that Rochester beat them twice this year. So they have some sense of how to do this. The challenge that's ahead of them. So I'm picking Rochester, and I hope I'm right, but I'm only shooting 500 in the playoffs. We'll see. Graham, who's your pick?
All right. This one was tough because it's the Rush, and as we've said probably for close to 5 years now, it's hard to pick against the Rush. They've been, as Melissa said, really consistent all year. But in Rochester, while they have been a little more inconsistent, they're really peaking at the right time. And as we've seen in this league, that can win you championships, as Rochester themselves proved by finishing. I think they were 9-7 one year and 8-8 the other, or something, and they won championships in both of those years. So peaking at the right time can certainly do it. but I think I'm going to go for the Rush on this one. I don't have a good reason why other than it's the Rush, and they've got outstanding defense. They've got excellent offense. They've got great goaltending. They've been in the finals. This will be their 4th straight year in the finals. Rochester certainly has a bunch of people on their team from their 3 straight wins a few years ago, but it's been a few years, so I don't think they have that many. They also have a bunch of rookies who have been playing very well, but I'm going to give the slight edge to the Rush in terms of their playoff veterans and experience. But it's going to be an exciting series, so I'm looking forward to that. That said, as we were talking about with the Cirque du Soleil, there are no games next weekend at all. So we all have a week to wait and just stare at our NLLTV.com website for another week. And so there won't be an Addicted to Lacrosse show next week either, because there won't be anything to talk about. We will see you in 2 weeks, hopefully on the Sunday night. That's our general plan. And we will talk about Game 1 of the NLL Finals. So that's it. This has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in 2 weeks.